Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, April 26th, 2022. You know what we say at the end of this. Time for another show. It is. It's true. Ready to roll out another one? Well, there's plenty of material. We'll hammer something out of all of this material. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. Bill tells us all the way from Portland, Maine. Kagro X, that's me, bids you, that's you, all a fine Eastern Orthodox Tesla Twitter's Testicles Day. Yeah, I'm already onto testicles and it's only 9:02 local time. Who knows when you're listening to this by podcast, but I've just said that right in your ear, and it's all happening today. This about 90% of Twitter is discussion of Twitter, which is very meta, which is not the company that's buying Twitter. Okay, just so you know. And yeah, I'm I guess agnostic on the Elon Musk purchase, although I've seen lots of good and valid concerns being raised. I'm not 100% sure what to make of this because he's kind of a weirdo, and I'm not certain whether he should be analyzed as a rational economic actor, an irrational economic actor, somebody who just is having fun with having billions of dollars and likes to be able to buy things and doesn't really care whether he makes more money or loses all his money. I really don't know. I mean, you assume that he doesn't want to lose all his money, but I don't know. I just don't know. He's a weird guy, and I'm not certain. And I guess I won't be. I mean, I have no plans to delete my account, but I guess if the place turns horrible, then I'll either, I don't know whether I'll delete my account or just leave or what, but, you know, I'm not going to sit there in a, toxic stew, I guess. It'll be sad if that happens. This was a lot of fun while it lasted. It could be ruined by a wacko. We'll see. Certainly if the idea is to somehow bring Donald Trump back to the platform, although Trump says that he won't come back and he'll only be communicating via his Truth Social platform. I doubt that that's really the case. And, beyond that, if it's just the idea is going to be, well, free speech means not having to patrol for Nazis and trolls, and things get really crazy, well, then I'll up and leave. Although, my experience on Twitter has been different from a lot of other people's experience. I imagine that although I am not a verified personage on Twitter, that there's some sort of additional overriding algorithm that works with accounts like mine, or that mine's been flagged in some way for different treatment, only because, for instance, I've seen a lot of people complain that when they have tweeted using, well, profanity, let's say, that they've gotten warnings from Twitter like, do you really want to say this? This is one of their newer additions to the algorithm, which, I don't know what I guess it's fine to check with people, and especially if you're not going to prevent them from expressing themselves the way they want to in the end. But, a little reminder, do you really want to raise the temperature like this? And if you do, you do. That's not so terrible. I saw some people complaining about it, but they were mentioning it, and I have thought back and said, I'm fairly certain I have, unlike on the radio show, used profanity on Twitter at some point, and fairly recently at that, and it just doesn't ask me that. I'm not certain whether that has anything to do with algorithm or not, but I guess what really makes me think that this is the case is I have also said things that are not profanity per se, but that are controversial, and that others have told me have landed them in either, as they say, in Twitter jail, meaning a 24-hour ban or something like that, or that they've been forced to take it down, etc. Usually stuff having to do with Trump and what I believe we should do to dispose of his body, whether he's still using it or not, things like that. And say, people are literally asking, how do you get away with it? I said the exact same thing, and they've even sent me screenshots of them saying that, and anything could be faked by the deep state, of course, as they say. But they have said exactly the same thing, and it's landed them in trouble. I wouldn't be surprised if there was something attached to my account that, based on the ratio of, I don't have like 1 million followers. I've got 41,000 something followers or something like that. I should check that, because also everybody spent the day yesterday insisting that they were losing followers. And I guess that's true. I think I had 41.4, you know how it abbreviates, 41.4K yesterday. Oh, look at that. I've never actually hovered over the number to see what the actual number is. 41,366. And I think yesterday it was at 41.4K. And people were like, I'm losing all these followers. And A, up until now I hadn't noticed that was the case. And B, a couple times in the past when people have said they must be purging trolls and fake accounts, etc. I didn't see that much happening on my account. But in saying all these things that landed other people in Twitter jail, my guess is that at some level there's an algorithm that says if somebody generates, as is the case here, generates 10 tweets or retweets for every tweet that he puts out, or whatever the number, whatever the ratio is, that's somebody that we don't really want to tamp down on. They are driving traffic and creating volume on the site, and we'll pretty much let them do whatever they want. There has to be a fairly egregious violation to step in and do something according to the algorithms. And I think that's what goes on with my account. My account's pretty active, and the people who follow tend to comment on the things that they see, or retweet them, or add some comment of their own, or respond in some way. And I think that might actually get you some additional grace with the rules. So I guess you can all work toward that. I don't know whether that's going to hold. I don't know whether that's something Elon Musk keeps in place. I also don't really know whether he actually ever takes over the thing, because I hear conflicting reports about what stage of the purchase we're really in here. That there's been a tender offer made, that the board has accepted the tender offer, but that there's a lot more hoops to jump through and hurdles to clear before ownership, such as it is, transfers to him, and how much of it we don't know. And, there may be other large shareholders who have a say in the way things are run. It might not all come down to Elon Musk. I'm not watching the transaction that much. I'm sure someone at some point will tell me what exactly is going on. And when, if the place goes to hell, I should be able to see that along the way. But for the most part, it hasn't presented itself to me yet. When it does, or when everybody leaves and I say, hey, this is no fun anymore, I'll follow along. Let's see, there was an alternative being pushed yesterday by a couple of people I am familiar with and friendly with online and on Twitter, saying, what were they calling it? I already forgot the name of it. Maybe I can call it up. But yeah, Counter Social. That's right. And apparently it's simply counter.social. You just put that in there, and there's no .com. I guess the top domain is so.so. And you land there, and they were... everyone was trying to escape there, and I figured I'll start an account there in case we all have to go there, just so nobody steals my account, steals my name or whatever. But apparently so many people were considering doing that, they crashed. The servers crashed, and so I haven't been able to use it yet. No word for you, no report for you so far on how it's going over there or whether or not it's a worthy alternative platform. Fingers crossed that nothing really changes at Twitter, I guess. But I did see some interesting theorizing about the problems that might arise. Like, less interesting to me, although certainly possible, was the idea that so many other of Elon Musk's key businesses depend on Chinese supplies of components, or that he wants to do business in China. Apparently, somebody claimed that China was Tesla's second largest market. Plus, of course, the batteries that are at the heart of the vehicle are made with Chinese components or assembled entirely in China. I'm not certain which. That might leave him vulnerable to pressure from the Chinese government to do business on Twitter differently, i.e. Censor it in China or censor anti-Chinese sentiment, perhaps, or something like that. That's, at this point, tenuous, but it's a possibility in today's world. More to my interest was the idea of if Elon Musk really is a loose cannon weirdo and vindictive at that, as some previous incidents in his past tend to suggest might be the case, would he avail himself with his ownership interest of, I don't know what, access for himself or for others of his choosing to the ostensibly private direct messages that are sent via Twitter or any private user data or anything like that? Could he turn over the direct message, private messages of people he doesn't like to the press, to their enemies, to the government, to a foreign government? I guess that's all a possibility and a concern as well. Something to think about. And I'm sure we'll hear lots about it when and if it begins happening. So, keeping an eye out and hoping that whatever else we might have to say about him, Elon Musk is essentially a goofball who enjoys cracking jokes even when they're at other people's expense on Twitter, and he just wants people to be able to continue to do that, and that for the most part it's no worse than it is now, although plenty of people will tell you that their experience on Twitter now has been ruined anyway, or is unbearable for one reason or another because they happen to attract a bunch of trolls. I have an awful lot of people muted and very few people blocked. So that makes for a more pleasant experience. To me, it's if I just don't see the nonsense, I feel better. Whether or not, it's not an accurate picture of what's going on Twitter, but I feel better. So I definitely recommend it to you. And also, of course, trolls feed on attention. And, garden variety trolls anyway. And if you don't give it to them, they do eventually get bored and go away. It's not something most people can keep up, simply yelling into the void for years and years and years on end. Well, that's not true. I speak as a podcaster when I say, wait a minute, hold on a second. That's actually my business model. But that's easier somehow. Typing it is more difficult, apparently. I don't know. I'm making something up as I go along. All right. Lots to catch up on that's happening this morning. Okay. Justice actually makes this point for me here. This is apropos, he says, and sends along the tweet of BK, who tweets as 26 more lives, which I don't know what that means. He bought a bunch of cats or something, perhaps. There once was an evil old man named Rupert. Rupert bought a town named MySpace, but no one liked Rupert, so they all left. The end. Okay, that's true. That may or may not be an accurate description of how MySpace died, but it's a possibility and something to think about. That's another thing, right? A lot of times people have proposed either leaving en masse and going somewhere else and making someplace else the hot new platform, or sticking around and, I don't know what, protesting things, making life hard for administrators. I don't know whether any of that really bears on Elon Musk himself personally or not, but I'm open to all possibilities. Let's see, other things that have been sent along. Boo Radley, Boo Rad 7. Has always been 7 there, or is this like your 7th iteration of this? Do you keep getting banned or something like that? Sends along a screen cap from, let's see, the Twitter account of Santiago Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R, who says, imagine spending $46 billion to stop people from posting this picture. Is that what this is all about? To censor this picture in the screen grab, which is a picture of Elon Musk with Ghislaine Maxwell. And I guess that happened. He is a weirdo. He's a rich weirdo on top of it all. And so somewhere along the line, you'll end up next to Ghislaine Maxwell, whether you want to or not, if you're rich enough. That's her job, is to put herself next to you. All right. Well, at any rate, something else to keep in mind. Let's see. Other news. I don't know. You know what? Today would be a great day, too. I've noticed in collecting stories from all of you when you forward things on that I've read through the suggestions of about, I don't know, let's say a dozen or more of you on a regular basis and in the last couple of weeks. And that for whatever reason, we could give over a whole day to reading what Patrick Snyder has suggested and I've forgotten to bring to everyone's attention on the air. Or very often he suggests something that seems like it requires or deserves a great deal of time and analysis, and I only realize it at a moment in the show when I don't have that time. But I apologize to Patrick. He's also out there suggesting great stories, and we probably ought to run through a few of them. And really, I should probably give some offline time to culling through them and figuring out which ones still make sense to bring to everyone's attention. There's a lot happening. Let me run through a number of these stories, and we'll do a potpourri of them through the first couple segments of the show. And, of course, toward the end, in our last segment, it is Tuesday. All expectations that we will, of course, speak with Joan McCarter and figure out what the hell's going on elsewhere and get a better perspective on things as well by bringing her in. And I guess by way of housekeeping, and I'll have to remind her of this later too, next Tuesday, I don't think I'm going to be able to do a live show. It's move out of college day for the current junior, ending his third year. So the next time I go back with him to move in is, this is it, your last year of college. I can't believe the whole thing is over already, and everyone was masked for the entire thing, and you don't know what any of your classmates look like. Anyway, that's not news per se, but a housekeeping item that we'll have to keep up with. Grabbing my attention this morning, there's an awful lot, and it comes from all over the world. Let's see. First of all, having spent a little time along the way in the Ukraine war, marveling over the various modern technologies that render this war different from so many others, there's news now of old technology being made new again in horrific ways. That is to say, apparently, according to The Guardian, the revival of anti-personnel weaponry that basically really in widespread use hasn't been seen since World War I. And in World War I, of course, one of the hallmarks of the war, the usage of anti-personnel weaponry that later would be banned by international convention as being inhumane and otherwise too horrific to be used. Although it wasn't banned, and they never got around to banning the thing. They just sort of grew away from it and tried other horrible weapons instead and found that they could kill more people with that stuff. And so they never got around to banning this stuff. And it has been used since then with limited application along the way and still never drawn a ban. Yes, it has been used in the past by the United States. The Guardian just put this story out, and I saw it tweeted around. Dozens of Bucha, is that the way they pronounce the village, the town, the city? I don't remember what scale, how large is Bucha. Dozens of Bucha civilians were killed by metal darts from Russian artillery. Forensic doctors apparently have discovered fléchettes, I guess is the pronunciation, rarely used in modern warfare, in bodies found in mass graves. Illustrated with a photo here demonstrating that we're talking about a really fairly small, it's a metal dart with a pointy end and metal fletching, would be feathers on an arrow, but, in this case they're not feathers, but it's shaped at the end like fletching of an arrow to help stabilize the thing in flight. So it does in fact look like a small dart, and it's about 4 millimeters in length. Is that right? Or no, I guess centimeters in length. It's marked millimeters, this measuring tape that they've got with it, but the small hash marks are the millimeters. So about 4 centimeters in length. And the story, according to Lorenzo Tondo, on the ground in Kyiv, is that dozens of civilians who died during the Russian occupation of the Ukrainian city of Bucha, there's the answer, were killed by tiny metal arrows from shells of a type fired by Russian artillery, forensic doctors have said. Pathologists and coroners were carrying out postmortems on bodies found in mass graves in the region north of Kyiv, where occupying Russian forces have been accused of atrocities, said they've found small metal darts called fléchettes embedded in people's heads and chests. We found several really thin, nail-like objects in the bodies of men and women, and so did others of my colleagues in the region, said Vladislav Perovsky, a Ukrainian forensic doctor who spoke to The Guardian. It's very hard to find those in the body. They're too thin. The majority of these bodies come from the Bucha Irpin region. Independent weapons experts who reviewed pictures of the metal arrows found in the bodies seen by The Guardian confirmed that they were fléchettes, an anti-personnel weapon widely used during the First World War. These small metal darts are contained in tank or field gun shells. Each shell contains up to 8,000 fléchettes. Once fired, shells burst when a timed fuse detonates and explodes above the ground. Fléchettes, typically between 3 and 4 centimeters in length, release from the shell and disperse in a conical arch about 300 meters wide and 100 meters long. On impact within a victim's body, the dart can lose rigidity, bending into a hook, which of course will make it impossible to remove without further damage, while the arrow's rear, made of 4 fins, often breaks away, causing a second wound. According to a number of witnesses in Bucha, fléchette rounds were fired by Russian artillery a few days before forces withdrew from the area at the end of March. There's a little graphic displaying how these things work, but yeah, essentially, it's I can see why it hasn't been banned. It'd be difficult to categorize the thing, but it's essentially like a gigantic shotgun, except the shell fires larger projectiles than just pellets, and those projectiles are particularly damaging because of the way they bend and break in the body. So you'll get 1 entry wound, but 2 wounds internally as the shaft of the fléchette bends and heads in one direction, and the fletching or fins break off after entering the body and head in a second direction. So you'll get 1 entrance wound, and you'll go and you might find 1 piece of the thing and successfully remove it, and then there's another piece in there somewhere else. You got it, you'll never find it, and people will bleed out before you're able to operate on them anyway. So particularly destructive, but operates like a shotgun, except a shotgun that apparently the cone of the projectiles is, as I said, 300 meters wide? I mean, that's crazy. And 100 meters long. So, I mean, football fields, several of them, in width. Although that doesn't look like the illustration that they've done. They've made the cone 300 meters long and 100 meters wide. But anyway, is what it looks like. So, yeah, particularly gross and deadly. And they go on to point out that one resident of Bucha told the Washington Post that she had found several nailed on her car. In other words, they, sticking out of the metal of the car. Although human rights groups have long sought a ban on fléchette shells, the munitions are not prohibited under international law. However, the use of imprecise lethal weapons in densely populated civilian areas is a violation of humanitarian law. According to Neil Gibson, a weapons expert at the UK-based Phoenix Insight Group, who has reviewed the photos of the fléchettes found in Bucha. The metal darts came from a 122 millimeter 3SH-1 artillery round in use by Russian artillery. I don't know how you would pronounce that whole 3SH-1. It's a capital S, lowercase h. It stands for something, I'm sure, but I'm not a Russian speaker. Another uncommon and rarely seen projectile, said Gibson on Twitter. This time it's the Russian equivalent of the U.S. Beehive series of anti-personnel projectiles. So yeah, we do have them. It operates like a true shrapnel projectile, but is filled with flechettes and a wax binder. Flechettes have been used as a ballistic weapon since the First World War. Dropped by then novel airplanes to attack infantry, the lethal metal darts were able to pierce helmets. They were not widely used during the Second World War, but reemerged in the Vietnam War when the U.S. employed a version of flechette loads packed into plastic cups. Flechettes are an anti-personnel weapon designed to penetrate dense vegetation and strike a large number of enemy soldiers, according to Amnesty International. They should never be used in built-up civilian areas. You don't have to be an arms expert, they say, to understand that Russia ignored the rules of war in Bucha. According to Bucha's mayor, Anatoly Fedoruk, Bucha was turned into a Chechen safari where they used landmines against civilians. So lots of ignoring of the usual, let's say, norms of war, if not necessarily the laws of war. Although it's a little bit, I don't know what, perhaps not really the best use of the terminology. The laws of war, law doesn't really usually apply in war. But until you catch the people afterwards. For now, you just have to live with the damage and swear revenge and say, but we'll do it in Nuremberg-style trials instead. I don't know. Not working out so well. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So before I depart entirely from the flechette story, I think it's only fair to note that one of the other modern uses of the weapon is noted here at the bottom of the story, that flechettes are rarely used in modern warfare other than periodically by the Israel Defense Forces, which deployed them in military operations in Lebanon and the Gaza Strip, killing and wounding civilians. So that should appear to be a problem, don't you think? In March of 2008, Palestinian journalist and videographer for Reuters, Fadel Shana, was killed by flechettes from a shell fired by an Israeli tank. X-rays later showed metal darts embedded in Shana's, I don't know how it's pronounced, Shana's chest, legs, and flak jacket, which was not armored. Although, I mean, essentially, you've just been fired on by a tank. I think you're finished. But, I mean, it just doesn't really necessarily matter that it was flechettes. But you should point that out. That's true. That's a good observation. And I'm sure that'll only add fuel to the fire of those already inclined to spend more time than I'm going to spend criticizing Israel Defense Forces for their tactics. There's plenty to do on that front, certainly. All right, well, only fair to note it before we leave. I guess I could have departed without doing so. But it's a real issue. Thought I would bring it up. And a great illustration of I don't know. We never heard anything about that, but we'll hear about it now because there's plenty of receptive ears to what are the terrible Russians doing. It's not whataboutism to say, well, other people do it too. You can just say, all right, that's all pretty gross. Not illegal, but perhaps should be. Though to what end, I don't know. People apparently will just continue to use it anyhow. All right, let's see. Other items for discussion. The big news of the day yesterday that I haven't gotten to yet and probably just ought to spend the rest of the show on is a big dump of text messages from Mark Meadows' phone yesterday. Apparently, I don't know the provenance here, but I guess dumped on CNN, which began sharing them widely, and everybody began combing over them to their horror, I guess, and finding out just how many Republican members of Congress and other prominent Republicans and activists were implicating themselves in sedition and insurrection. And I guess the fallout yet to come. CNN's story is headlined, well, you know what? Headlined, CNN exclusive, Mark Meadows' 2,319 text messages reveal Trump's inner circle communications before and after January 6th. And there's an awful lot, and I don't know I haven't read the story yet, so I don't know how they deal with the messages, but all day long people were taking individual examples of them, tweeting them around with their commentary. You will likely have heard some of the worst so far. But before I even turn in that direction, there was something else I wanted to circle back on. Of no consequence to most of the world, of course, but your daily Moldovan kayaking report. I bring this up because it seems like yesterday's listeners' commentary on my searching through to see whether Moldova was indeed landlocked or not. We were talking about, I couldn't tell from Google Maps exactly what I was looking at. Was I really looking at a sea lane or a shallow, swampy area that, a river delta or that just wasn't navigable or what? And I think we were looking at two different waterway access points in Moldova. There's 2 points at which Moldova nearly reaches the water, or looks to nearly reach the water from a 10,000 foot level, whatever it is. It's actually many more than that. But if you're looking at, Google Maps, where you can see the entire country on the page, it's only if you really, really zoom in, you can see whether or not they actually reach the water. I think the swampy area that we're talking about, it's like Moldova, I guess if you're, look at the maps, figure out what body of water we're talking about here. The Black Sea, and then some inlets from the Black Sea that appear to give Moldova, like I said, 2 points. It's almost as if Moldova forks at the southern end, and there are 2 points at either end of that a part of the country that appear to approach the water, but that the forks are separated by an extra little weird branch of Ukraine that just sneaks by. It's a very odd border. Moldova's border is bizarre, and there's no accounting for it. There's a very weird and winding border with Romania, which is explained by, I think, a river. When it's a natural border like that, you get those weird lines. But the drawing of the line between Moldova and Ukraine on its southern border, Moldova's southern border with Ukraine, is, if you zoom in, it's very weird and winding, but it's rigid and angular, so it suggests that it's not a river. And you go and you look in there, and they're really literally drawing borders around, I guess, people's fields. And there's no border barrier either, which is unusual for those of us always talking about the border fence / wall with Mexico. And you think of international borders as being garrisoned barriers between the countries, but that's only the case in a very small percentage of those borders. And you can wander in and out of the border between Moldova and Ukraine, because why not? It's just not a thing people do, so they don't bother building a wall. But if you really zoom in, you can see these weirdo little things. And so there's this little area further to the west is this second area that I was looking at, that I think if you sneak up this river, you get to a place, the one all the way to the east, closer to Odessa. It really looks like Moldova really does come almost to the water anyway, and very near a much larger inlet. But the larger inlet is the swampier one. And there isn't any, I don't think, real serious sea access there for Moldova, because apparently the Moldovan border ends, I don't know what the scale of this is, but it literally ends just before it reaches the water. And that the water access appears to be walled off, believe it or not, by Ukraine. I guess it was obviously intentional. Oh, I guess maybe the idea was to prevent Moldovan access to the sea there, which seems a little rude. But the western side, which looks even more improbable, is in fact a port. It is the port of a name that I cannot pronounce. Giur, Giulesti is my best attempt at that. And believe it or not, this is actually a port navigable by ocean-going vessels. So Moldova does have exactly one navigable port. The port of whatever the hell this is. Officially, the Giurgiuleshti International Free Port. A port on the Danube River at its confluence with the Prut River, I guess, and the only port in Moldova. So how do you like that? And it is, in fact, accessible to seagoing vessels, and there you go. It just doesn't look like it's accessible to seagoing vessels until you really zoom in. And if you want to know more about it, the port is managed by a Dutch firm, Danube Logistics, which, with the aid of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, has invested $60 million in the project. 460 employees, half from the village nearby of Giurgiuleshti, which is 0.5 miles inland. As of 2015, there were no facilities there which catered to travelers or visiting crewmen. So I don't really know exactly what's going on there, but I guess they've declared it to be a free port, and exercising that freedom, nobody's using the port. I really have no idea. The port was built as a result of a 2005 territorial exchange with Ukraine, where Moldova received a 430-meter bank of the Danube and Prut rivers, which is the Prut River is an international waterway. Ukraine was supposed to receive a short section of road that leaves and re-enters Ukrainian territory near the Moldovan village of Palancha, perhaps, at the easternmost point of Moldova. After a long territorial dispute, it was decided that Moldova would keep the land, but the road itself would be owned and maintained by Ukrainians. So now all vehicles have to go through the checkpoint while driving from Ukraine to Ukraine. How do you like that? You can only find that stuff if you really, I don't know, I guess if you really spend too much time on Wikipedia. And now we've spent too much time on that subject, but I don't know, somehow fascinating to me, hopefully to you too. But I know you're probably even more fascinated by all of the text messages uncovered by CNN yesterday. I would say perhaps, would you call this a companion piece? I just spotted some tweets highlighting something from ProPublica, which seems to be similar. Their piece is called Building the Big Lie Inside the Creation of Trump's Stolen Election Myth. Bylines here on this one are for Doug Bach Clark, Alexandra Berzon, and Kirsten Berg. Over at CNN, the story is written by Jamie Gangle, I guess. I've never gotten that one right. Jeremy Herb and Elizabeth Stewart. I think they're all talking about the same things. The ProPublica piece is enormous, as their investigative pieces often are. I guess the best summation of it might be, or the most available summation anyway, from Justin Hendricks, who tweets about it and grabs highlights in a short Twitter thread, which begins with a, quote, internal emails and interviews with key participants, unquote, by a ProPublica team reveal for the first time the extent to which leading advocates of the rigged election theory touted evidence they knew to be disproven, disputed, or dismissed as dubious. That was the subject of a lot of the tweeting about yesterday's text messages, including some from Jason Miller, which I saw highlighted, in which he basically says, hey, this is a big lie and all, but maybe we should say that the riot is Antifa or something like that. I'll see if I can pick that up. But generally speaking, that they were in possession of texts that indicate that they are proposing to give a public story or public spin that they know to be false, but doing it anyway, which is fairly despicable, but I'm sure happens all the time. But in particular, this seems to be an extreme example of it. Justin goes on in describing the ProPublica piece by saying this piece drags a fine comb through some of the most impactful false conspiracy theories that helped foment the insurrection. It names a number of stooges alongside leaders including Patrick Byrne, Mike Flynn, Sidney Powell, Ron Watkins, Rudy Giuliani, and others. And then the tweet thread concludes by saying Patrick Byrne's role as a, quote, leader and financier of the big lie comes into sharper focus. There's a screen grab of one passage in particular that Justin includes that reads, ProPublica has obtained a trove of internal emails and other documentation. So different trove than the CNN texts, I guess, but along similar lines. Taken together, they tell the inside story of a group of people who propagated a number of the most pervasive theories about how the election was stolen, especially that voting machines were to blame, and helped move them from the far-right fringe to the center of the Republican Party. That was the central tenet of the central difference between the candidates in the Republican gubernatorial debate down in Georgia just the other day. David Perdue standing foursquare for the big lie theory. Brian Kemp kind of skirting it, but saying, no, David Perdue is to blame for his own loss because he's a loser, but also, not entirely foreclosing the possibility that he too might become a big lie believer and practitioner in the end. Well, anyway, back to the ProPublica screen grab from Justin here. Those records, as well as interviews with key participants, show for the first time the extent to which leading advocates of the stolen election theory touted evidence that they knew to be disproven or that had been credibly disputed or dismissed as dubious by operatives within their own camp. Some members of the coalition presented this mix of unreliable witnesses, unconfirmed rumor, and suspect analyses as fact in published reports, talking points, and court documents. In several cases, their assertions became the basis for Trump's claims that the election had been rigged. I mean, that's not a surprise to anyone, except as, oh gosh, I'm still astonished that they are such willing liars. But, that's the reality of things. Let me, did I park this thing in my feed yet? No, probably not. Not Justin's tweets, but I'll put those away so you can read those. Let's jump over. Oh, you know what? Let's jump over to the CNN story and see how they handle this and whether there's any news from it, or take a look at how they present their trove of texts. Again, CNN exclusive at that point anyway. Mark Meadows and the 2,300 plus texts about before and after January 6th. I know that one of them that astonished everybody was tweets from Marjorie Trader Greene insisting that Meadows prevail on Donald Trump, then still president, to declare martial law, to call off the transfer of power to Joe Biden, which people pointed out first, well, gosh, that's directly contradictory to the testimony she gave in her hearing from last Friday, and that's true. It wasn't missed by the plaintiff's attorney. That was known, that she was largely advocating for that. She just denied it, and every time you showed her text of tweets or any other communications or copies of videos of her saying that she was for imposing martial law to stop the transfer of power, she denied that she did it, and when presented with the evidence said that could be fake, or I don't remember doing that, or whatever. So it wasn't that it wasn't known, and only now do we discover this too late. It's in the hands of the plaintiff's attorneys anyway. It's just there's not much you can do with it at this stage. Maybe later at some trial stage, if a federal or state court decides to further consider whatever recommendation the administrative law judge here makes. But also of considerable interest was the date on this tweet, that it was as late as January 17th, 2021. She's still prevailing, 11 days after the insurrection attack, the apex of the insurrection, physical apex of the insurrection. She's still advocating for imposing martial law. And what are we at 17? 3 days shy of Inauguration Day. I mean, it got no audience anywhere, I don't think. I mean, there were crazy people inside the White House probably, and Trump's circle, who were also advocating for it. But it got no traction. They didn't, in fact, declare martial law at any point, though they may very well have considered trying to do so. But, anyway, that was of some interest. So here at CNN, the report begins. CNN has obtained 2,319 text messages, and it's linked here, so maybe you can go, it looks like you can go to another CNN link and read all those things, and that's what people spent their time doing yesterday. These texts that former President Donald Trump's White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows sent and received between Election Day 2020 and President Joe Biden's January 20th, 2021 inauguration. And I'm sure there's mention of here somewhere, because I saw lots of people talking about it, that there's another 1,000+ texts that have not yet been revealed and either are being withheld for some reason or perhaps aren't relevant to the investigation. The vast trove of texts offers the most revealing picture to date of how Trump's inner circle, supporters, and Republican lawmakers worked behind the scenes to try to overturn the election results and then reacted to the violence that effort unleashed at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Also much in circulation yesterday were the dismayed calls for help from Republican members of Congress who let on very clearly, when they think they need help and rescue from physical menace, that A, they believe it is Donald Trump who is in control of the people who are doing this, B, that they then come back later and say, oh gosh, this was all just tourism, and they all vote no on impeaching Trump later on for doing this thing. But at the time, they're fairly certain that he's to blame for it, including, there's also, I think, another call or text from Marjorie Taylor Greene passing on the rumor that she had heard that there was an active shooter on the first floor of the Capitol. Of course, there was a shooting in the Capitol, and it was police who shot Ashley Babbitt, but that would have been on the second floor of the Capitol. I don't know whether she knew where she was or what floor it was, or whether she was thinking she was the active shooter somebody else? Had they heard the gunshots and she didn't know what floor she was on because she was brand new to Congress? I don't know what kind of confusion there was in her mind about that, but what was of interest was that she thought that it was a member of the crowd who was the active shooter, and that her first thought, apparently, according to the text, was that it was Donald Trump who could call this active shooter off. In other words, active shooter in the Capitol, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, believe that this is a pro-Trump person that can be controlled by Trump, and I wish you would control them and get them out of here. P.S. later on, once I was safe again, I don't care, and I'm not voting for impeachment, and really it was Antifa in disguise. So much for that. Anyway, the logs, back to the CNN article, which Meadows selectively provided to the House committee, which means that he's made the decisions about what to withhold and what not to. So these are plenty incriminating. You wonder what he's holding back. Anyway, selectively provided to the House committee investigating the January 6th attack. They show how the former chief of staff was at the nexus of sprawling conspiracy theories, baselessly claiming the election had been stolen. They also demonstrate how he played a key role in the attempts to stop Biden's certification on January 6th. The never-before-seen texts include messages from Trump's family, daughter Ivanka Trump, son-in-law Jared Kushner, and son Donald Trump Jr., as well as White House and campaign officials, cabinet members, Republican Party leaders, January 6th rally organizers, Rudy Giuliani, MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell, Sean Hannity, and other Fox hosts. There are also text exchanges with more than 40 current and former Republican members of Congress, including Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, Representatives Jim Jordan of Ohio, Mo Brooks of Alabama, and Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. The texts include everything from plans to fight the election results to surprising and unexpected reactions on January 6th from some of Trump's staunchest allies. At 2:28 p.m., Greene, the conservative firebrand and criminal, who had helped to plan the congressional objections that day, texted Meadows with an urgent plea for help as the violence was unfolding at the Capitol. Mark, I was just told there's an active shooter on the first floor of the Capitol. Please tell the president to calm people. This isn't the way to solve anything, Greene wrote. Meadows does not appear to reply. And Greene does not appear to understand or use punctuation. More messages flooded in. Mark, this needs to stop now. Can I do anything to help? Mick Mulvaney, Trump's former acting White House chief of staff, texted Meadows. It's really bad up here on the Hill. They have breached the Capitol. Georgia Republican Representative Barry Loudermilk, a no vote on impeachment, by the way, wrote, the president needs to stop this ASAP, texted GOP Representative William Timmons of South Carolina, another no vote on impeachment. POTUS is engaging, Meadows sent in response to Loudermilk. We are doing it, he texted to Timmons. Thanks. This doesn't help our cause, Loudermilk replied. Shortly after, Donald Trump Jr. weighs in. I guess they're correcting it to, this is one you go to the mattresses on. They will try to F his entire legacy on this if it gets worse. Tell them, so that's Donald Trump Jr., by the way. First of all, legacy, and not really exactly understanding the idea of going to the mattresses, but, used as a, hey, it's very serious kind of shorthand. And, now, of course, after the fact, Donald Trump Jr. says, the whole thing was an Antifa hoax, and it was just tourists, and they were hugging and kissing the police, just like his dad says. All caps, tell them to go home, texted Trump's first chief of staff, Reince Priebus. Next section here, heated rhetoric and conspiracy theories. The text messages CNN obtained begin on Election Day, November 3rd, 2020. Even before the election was called, Meadows was inundated with conspiracy theories about election fraud, strategies to challenge the results, and pleas for Trump to keep fighting. The messages from GOP activists, donors, Republican members of Congress, and state party officials appear to act as an echo chamber, affirming Trump's false claims that the election was stolen. For months leading up to Election Day, Trump had claimed the only way he could lose was if the election was rigged. Part of his plan, of course. Previously disclosed text messages show that former Trump administration Energy Secretary Rick Perry and Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., each texted Meadows on November 4th and 5th with ideas for overturning the election. On November 7th, hours before the election was called, Perry texted Meadows again, we have the data-driven program that can clearly show where the fraud was committed. This is the silver bullet. Not telling anyone what it was anyway, but and it turns out not to have been one. While Perry had previously denied CNN reporting about his text messages to Meadows, CNN has confirmed it's his cell phone. And he signed his text, Rick Perry, including his number, which you don't actually have to do. Other texts, however, include hints of doubt expressed by members of Trump's team and even Meadows himself about the veracity of conspiracy theories being spread by Trump's Kraken team, outside attorneys working for Trump that included Giuliani and Sidney Powell, some key congressional allies who worked with Trump's campaign initially in his efforts to overturn the election, such as Senator Mike Lee and Congressman Chip Roy, we heard about them last week, ultimately soured on the approach as the January 6th congressional certification neared, CNN has previously reported. The texts also show how Trump allies were quick to deflect responsibility for the January 6th attack. Shortly after pro-Trump rioters breached the Capitol, one of his top aides began crafting a counter-narrative. Here it is. At 3:45 p.m., Trump campaign spokesman Jason Miller suggested to Meadows and Trump aide Dan Scavino that Trump should tweet, "Call me crazy, but ideas for..." Oh, well, I don't think that's what Trump... They messed it up here. He's tweeting, "Here are 2 ideas for Trump tweets." And it's Jason Miller saying, "Call me crazy, but ideas for 2 tweets from POTUS." And then those 2 ideas follow. It's not that Jason Miller is suggesting that Trump tweet the instructions or the setup that "call me crazy," but the 2 tweets that he thinks the president should send or choose from include: "Bad apples, likely Antifa or other crazed leftists, infiltrated today's peaceful protest over the fraudulent vote count. Violence is never acceptable. MAGA supporters embrace our police, and the rule of law should leave the Capitol now." That's the first of his suggested tweets. The second, I'll read over our exit music here. The second one reading, "The fake news media who encouraged this summer's violent and radical riots are now trying to blame peaceful and innocent MAGA supporters for violent actions. This isn't who we are. Our people should head home and let the criminals suffer the consequences." That's a suggestion from Jason Miller, who basically outlines in the setup to the whole thing, "I know this isn't true, but I think we can get away with it and we should try it anyway." Great guy. All right, welcome back now to Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Boy, well, there's an awful lot, and we could keep reading this and could occupy our time all day long with the CNN article and certainly the ProPublica article as well. Maybe at this point, I will note for the record, how much to finish this section. There's still an awful lot. So lots of other crazy, terrible things, including, evidence of, once again, Marjorie Taylor Greene having essentially perjured herself in the proceedings of last Friday in front of the administrative law judge, having been asked about whether or not she spent time ahead of time on January 6th planning the January 6th rally and events of the day with people in the White House. I believe she denied having attended a White House meeting for planning the events of the 6th, even though she had tweeted pictures of herself leaving the White House and commenting that they had just had a great meeting about planning the events of January 6th. So whatever. More evidence of that in the texts, including, when was it? On December 31st, saying, "Good morning, Mark. I'm here in D.C. We have to get organized for the 6th. Green wrote, "I would like to meet with Rudy Giuliani again. We didn't get to speak with him long. Also, anyone who can help. We are getting a lot of members on board, and we need to lay out the best case for each state." Meadows doesn't appear to respond to that one because she's not even a member of Congress yet at that point, but this is still December. She's setting up. And then by January 17th, as I mentioned, Greene was suggesting ways to keep Trump in office, telling Meadows that there were several Republicans in Congress who still wanted the then president to declare martial law, which she misspells, of course, as MARSHALL law, but whatever. And, she's as stupid as ever. Now, perhaps I ought to take a look at this section. What Meadows turned over. Meadows provided the cache of 2,319 messages to the January 6th committee in December of last year, but soon after, he stopped cooperating and refused to appear for a deposition. Ultimately, the House voted to hold the former White House chief of staff in contempt of Congress. The Justice Department has not yet announced whether it will charge Meadows, even though that's supposed to be automatic, but you know how it is. I've told you a million times that it's hard enough even when the administration wouldn't want to charge someone because it's a member of their own administration. It's difficult. And guess what? It's also difficult even when you're charging the members of a previous administration for reasons unknown. But we can guess at them. Anyway, Meadows has sued the House committee in an attempt to block the congressional subpoenas. And in a late-night court filing on Friday, the committee responded with new details revealing Meadows was warned ahead of time that January 6th could turn violent, according to testimony from Cassidy Hutchison, one of Meadows' former White House aides. So, yes, also more emerging evidence of how soon or how early before January 6th there were, in fact, clear indications that there could be violence. Apparently, those indications evaded some observers. They weren't widely discussed, but I mean, it was pretty well known. I don't know how much of it I knew before January 6th. It's hard to tell because things are a blur there, but I do recall that there was certainly discussion of crazy ideas about what they might do, and certainly that they were hinting that they were going to be out of control in one way or another on January 6th. They were pretty open about it. And the wargaming of the possibilities always included, well, what if there's just shenanigans on the floor and they just attempt to dispute the validity of the Electoral College vote, even though they have no basis for doing so. There wasn't a lot of wargaming of what if there's a riot outside, but there was a lot of chatter that made it clear that the people involved knew that that's how they intended to apply their pressure. Anyway, in addition, the committee released text messages exchanged with Republican members of Congress, including texts with Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania about a scheme to replace Justice Department leaders who opposed Trump's claims of election fraud. Oh, yes, that's probably worth discussing, too. In late December, Perry reached out to Meadows, connecting him to then DOJ official Jeffrey Clark, who was pushing unfounded claims of voter fraud inside the Justice Department. Trump was considering firing the acting attorney general and installing Clark instead. Clark invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination more than 100 times when he spoke to the January 6th committee in February. And in case you're wondering about the connection there, Perry, I guess, knows Clark because at the time, Clark was basically a middle to upper level DOJ official, apparently in charge of, I don't know whether you call it the environmental section, but he dealt with environmental law, which would have been overlapped some with Perry's role as energy secretary, right? So anyway, he's pushing Clark. I don't know who else might have been pushing Clark. The whole incident is pretty amazing, although I really have so many questions about how this thing worked for Trump. I'll continue on here. On December 26th, Perry texted Meadows, "Mark, just checking in as time continues to count down. 11 days to 1/6, so he knows something's going on, and 25 days to inauguration. We got to get going. Mark, you should call Jeff," he continued. "I just got off the phone with him, and he explained to me why the principal deputy won't work, especially with the FBI. They will view it as his, perhaps, not having the authority to enforce what needs to be done." Well, certainly not the, principal deputy attorney general who generally deals with environmental law isn't likely to be able to move the FBI to seize voting machines or anything like that. "I got it," Meadows responded. "I think I understand. Let me work on the deputy position." On December 28th, Perry reached out again. "Did you call Jeff Clark?" Meadows does not appear to respond. Meadows withheld more than 1,000 of his messages from the committee on claims of privilege. The panel said in Friday's court filing, in his lawsuit, Meadows' attorney argued the former White House chief of staff has been put in the untenable position of choosing between conflicting privilege claims. Let me solve it for you. Give me the texts. There you go. Now, another story that I didn't mention that many of you would have marveled at yesterday. Sean Hannity apparently appears to take marching orders about what to cover and how to cover it directly from Meadows, which is a very journalisty thing to do, of course. Let's see. In addition to the text, the committee released CNN and other news organizations have previously published selections of text messages Meadows received from Lee, Roy, Trump Jr., Perry, and Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas. The logs obtained by CNN include numerous passages from official White House cell phone numbers. Some have been identified by CNN. Others are unknown. There are numerous group texts with Trump's inner circle. The various group chats include Meadows, Ivanka Trump, Trump Jr., and Kushner, as well as top advisors such as Hope Hicks. How does she do it? Campaign manager Bill Stapien, Miller, and Scavino, and others. Some texts include only links to news reports and social media. Others appear to contain content that was cut and pasted and forwarded. The logs do not contain images or attachments. Meadows' messages also include dozens of exchanges with Fox hosts, as well as journalists from the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Associated Press, Politico, Bloomberg, NBC, ABC, CBS, and CNN. Among Meadows' most frequent interactions were those with Sean Hannity, a well-known friend of Trump. Throughout the logs, Hannity both gives advice and asks for direction. On the afternoon of Election Day, Hannity texted Meadows to ask about turnout in North Carolina. Meadows responded, "Stress every vote matters. Get out and vote." That's fine. "Yes, sir," Hannity replied. "On it. Any place in particular we need a push? Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada." "Got it. Everywhere," Hannity said. So, that's kind of an unusual exchange. At any rate, perhaps at this point, having outlined much of what we have here, although, there's certainly more. There's an enormous amount of information here. As you might imagine. I wonder whether we might benefit from a quick look over at the ProPublica piece here, Building the Big Lie Inside the Creation of Trump's Stolen Election Myth, and maybe at least read the setup paragraphs of what's going on here. There's a sort of a subheader here. Internal emails and interviews with key participants reveal for the first time the extent to which leading advocates of the rigged election theory touted evidence that they knew to be disproven, disputed, or dismissed as dubious. Yes, that was what was Justin Hendricks was quoting before. Let's see. It should be noted, perhaps, that this story is part of an ongoing collaborative reporting effort between ProPublica and Frontline that includes the documentary film Plot to Overturn the Election. The film aired recently on PBS and can be viewed here, and I think I'd like to view it, and perhaps you would too, and that's why this link will be in the roundup. It's a link, though, inside the ProPublica piece if you're looking for it. Here's the setup. By the time Leamsey, Leamsy, Leamsy Salazar, sat down in front of a video recorder in a lawyer's office in Dallas, he had grown accustomed to divulging state secrets. After swearing to tell nothing but the truth, so help him God, he recounted that he was born in Venezuela in 1974, enlisted in the Army, and rose through its special operations ranks. He described how in 2007, I see what's going on here, he became the chief of security for Hugo Chavez, the Venezuelan leader whose electoral victories had been challenged by outside observers and opposition parties. After Chavez died in 2013, Salazar said he provided intelligence on top Venezuelan officials involved in drug trafficking to American law enforcement agencies, which had helped him defect. After about 45 minutes of Salazar telling his life story, the lawyer questioning him, Louis Sessions, abruptly changed the course of the conversation. "I want to take a moment to get off the track," said Sessions, the brother of Republican Representative Pete Sessions of Texas. Aha. "Why are you here? What has motivated you to come forward?" "I felt that the world should know. They should know the truth," Salazar answered. "The truth about the corruption, about the manipulation, about the lies." "The truth about what?" Sessions asked. "He just told you." "In this case, it's the manipulation of votes," Salazar said, "and the lies being told to a country." That morning of November 13th, 2020, Salazar had a new sort of intelligence to share. He claimed to know that the 2020 U.S. presidential election had been rigged, and how. Speaking through an interpreter, Salazar said that when he worked for Chavez, he had attended meetings in which the administration discussed how to develop specialized software to steal elections with representatives from Smartmatic, a voting technology company whose founders had ties to Venezuela. He recalled that during the 2013 presidential election in a secret counting center in Caracas, the capital, he saw officials use software to change votes in favor of Chavez's successor, Nicolas Maduro, after the polls closed. Watching the 2020 American election, he said he noticed votes for Joe Biden jumping in a pattern that he thought was similar. What? Yeah, right. When Sessions asked if Salazar could draw a connection between the events in Venezuela and the recent American election, Salazar replied, "I can show the similarity. In the 2020 election, Smartmatic machines were only used in Los Angeles." But Salazar explained away this discrepancy. He claimed that the company's software had been, quote, purchased by Dominion Voting Systems, whose machines were used in such battleground states as Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, all of which had gone to Biden, sealing his victory over Donald Trump. Salazar said in a subsequent court filing that he had taken his concerns about the election to, quote, a number of reliable and intelligent ex-co-workers of mine that are still informants and work with the intelligence community. He did not specify whether he meant U.S. or Venezuelan intelligence community. From there, sources told ProPublica his concerns reached a former intelligence officer active in Republican politics, and then the conservative lawyer Sidney Powell. Powell was on the hunt for just such information. Now we see where that came from. By the second week of November, it had become known in right-wing circles that she was working behind the scenes with the president's legal team to challenge the results of the election. In an email to ProPublica, Sessions wrote that he conducted the interview at the request of a person working with Sidney Powell's legal team. The day after the interview, Trump made Powell's position official with an announcement on Twitter. The following morning, Powell traveled to South Carolina, where a loose coalition of lawyers, cybersecurity experts, and former military intelligence officers were gathering on a plantation owned by the defamation lawyer Lynn Wood to search for evidence of election fraud. One person present at the plantation said that Wood and Powell treated the Salazar video like the holy grail of evidence. In an email to ProPublica, Wood wrote that he was not part of any coalition and he only had seen a few minutes of the video, in which he had no interest beyond general curiosity. Sure, Powell did not respond to requests for comment. There was just one problem. Salazar's claims were easily disprovable. I was wondering when we were going to get to the problems. Hours after the video was recorded, Trump campaign staffers reviewed some allegations about Dominion that were almost identical, and it took them less than a day to discover they were baseless. The staffers prepared an internal memo with section headings that read, Dominion has no company ties to Venezuela. Dominion and Smartmatic terminated their contract in 2012, and there is no evidence that Dominion used Smartmatic's software in the 2020 election cycle. Independent fact-checkers came to the same conclusions. Dominion later released a statement calling a version of these allegations that Powell pushed in a lawsuit baseless, senseless, physically impossible, and unsupported by any evidence whatsoever. A lawyer for Smartmatic wrote to ProPublica, there are no ties between Dominion Voting Systems and Smartmatic, plain and simple. He added that Salazar's testimony is full of inaccuracies, strongly denied that Smartmatic's technology was designed to steal Venezuelan elections, and, said the company, which operates worldwide, has registered and counted over 5 billion votes without a single security breach. Salazar did not respond to requests for comment. Salazar's story was just one of many pieces of so-called evidence that members of the coalition have offered as proof that the 2020 election was rigged. That unfounded belief has emerged as one of the most potent forces in American politics. Numerous polls show that over 2/3 of Republicans doubt the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Millions of those Republicans believe foreign governments reprogrammed American voting machines. ProPublica has obtained a trove of internal emails and other documentation that, taken together, tell the inside story of a group of people who propagated a number of the most pervasive theories about how the election was stolen, especially that the voting machines were to blame, and helped move them from far-right fringe to the center of the Republican Party. Those records, as well as interviews with key participants, show for the first time the extent to which leading advocates of the stolen election theory touted evidence that they knew to be disproven or had been credibly disputed or dismissed as dubious by operatives within their own camp. This is the part we read earlier, right? And it goes on to say, some members of the coalition presented this mix of unreliable witnesses, unconfirmed rumor, and suspect analyses as fact in published reports, talking points in court documents. In several cases, their assertions became the basis for Trump's claims that the election had been rigged. Our examination of their actions from the 2020 election to the present day reveals a pattern. Many members of the coalition would advance a theory based on evidence that was never vetted or that they'd been told was flawed. Then, when the theory was debunked, they'd move on to the next alternative, and then the next. The coalition includes several figures who have attracted national attention. Retired Army Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who served briefly as National Security Advisor to Trump before pleading guilty to lying to law enforcement about his contacts with Russian officials. He's the most well-known. Patrick Byrne, the former CEO of Overstock.com. Ah, yes, okay. Who left his position after his romantic relationship with the convicted Russian agent Maria Butina became public. Gee whiz. He's the coalition's chief financier and a frequent intermediary with the press. Powell, who represented Flynn in his attempts to reverse his guilty plea, spearheaded efforts in the courts. Before Powell arrived at the plantation, Wood had filed a lawsuit in federal court in Atlanta against Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger that sought to stop him from certifying Biden's victory. Soon after Powell showed up, Wood submitted an anonymized declaration from Salazar as evidence of how the election was corrupted. He then filed an emergency motion that sought access to Dominion machines in Georgia to conduct a forensic inspection of this equipment and the data therein. The case was eventually dismissed, but it would serve as a template for the series of high-profile lawsuits that Powell would file in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. Salazar's declaration was central to the four lawsuits, and it went further than the assertions he had made in the video. His claim that he could show the similarity between anomalies in Venezuelan and American elections expanded to become an allegation that, quote, the DNA of every vote tabulating company's software and system in the United States was potentially compromised. Wood told ProPublica, I was not involved in the vetting, drafting, or filing of any of the lawsuits filed by Sidney Powell, though his name appears as of counsel in all four. A judge sanctioned him in the Michigan case, writing that while Wood now seeks to distance himself from this litigation to avoid sanctions, the court concludes that he was aware of this lawsuit when it was filed, aware that he was identified as co-counsel for plaintiffs, and as a result shares responsibility with the other lawyers for any sanctionable conduct. All the lawsuits would fail, with judges excoriating the quality of their evidence. It wasn't just the evidence in the lawsuits that was flawed. In fact, much of the evidence that members of the coalition contributed to the stolen election myth outside the courts was also weak. Yet the coalition's failure to prove its theories has not hindered its ability to spread them. This, then, coming up, is the story of how little untruths added up to the big lie. That's the exciting part. That's the preamble to the whole thing. No way we'll be able to read through it on the air today because we're coming up on the end of our third segment, and of course would like to visit with Joan when she is available, and doubtless she has some things to say about this too. But maybe having given you a flavor for that, I can jump to one or two other stories. This one seems important as well, and we'll probably be hearing a little bit more about this one, though it feels, again, like we've heard this story before. It's just that it's a number of similar ones we've heard. The Daily Beast reports, police raid MAGA, quote, king of toxic masculinity in human trafficking investigation. Yes, that's right. Will Sommer reporting for the Daily Beast. The raid was prompted by reports that an American woman had been abducted. This filed yesterday. Who are we talking about? Romanian police, right there near Moldova, I guess. Romanian police raided the home of prominent pro-Trump online personality Andrew Tate this month as part of a human trafficking investigation, bringing new attention to Tate's ties to leading figures in the American MAGA movement. I guess really no surprise here to the people who have insisted that Russian interest in Moldova, which again borders Romania, was for some reason driven by widespread prostitution and human trafficking operations in Moldova. And I'm not certain what the connection is supposed to be, other than Russians like to deal in that stuff, and that maybe they, at least the Russian oligarchs and criminals like to deal in that stuff, and they thought, I don't know what, they could raid the market and scoop up all the actors in it. I don't know. Not sure exactly what the interest in Moldova is supposed to be, but that gets brought up a lot. And right across the Moldovan border in Romania is Andrew Tate, who sounds American and is apparently mixed up in all of this stuff. Before the April 11th raid, Tate was best known as a kickboxer and vocal Trump supporter in the online far right. On social media, Tate portrayed himself as a wealthy, cigar-smoking playboy, prompting one admirer to dub him the king of toxic masculinity. But Tate's treatment of women had an ugly side. You don't say. I don't know if there was a decent side. In 2016, he was booted off the British version of Big Brother, the TV show, over a video of him hitting a woman with a belt. Eesh. This March, Britain's Daily Mirror tabloid profiled him and his brother Tristan Tate and their Romania-based business. That's just fishy already, a Romania-based business, which used webcam models to trick men into sending the brothers tens of thousands of dollars. In one video on his YouTube channel, Andrew Tate said 40% of the reason he moved to Romania, that's a good question. Why did you move to Romania? 40% of it, whatever that means, was because Romanian police were less likely to pursue sexual assault allegations. Great. Tate's unsavory activities didn't stop him from building links with the stars of the Trumpian right, nor did the fact that he had absconded to Romania. Of course not. It's a plus in their book. In 2019, Tate palled around Washington, D.C. with prominent online Trump activists and conspiracy theorists. He shared a meal with far-right cable news commentator Jack Posobiec and InfoWars host Paul Joseph Watson, and appeared multiple times on InfoWars shows in Trump's Washington hotel, the one that was facially invalid from the beginning and should have landed Trump in jail immediately and have had it suspended him from the presidency because of its facial violation of both emoluments clauses, but whatever. In Trump's Washington hotel, Tate posed for a picture with Brexit advocate Nigel Farage and sat in a group in the Trump hotel lobby with the likes of Pizzagate conspiracy theorist Mike Cernovich and future January 6th protest organizer Ali Alexander. Cernovich visited the Tate brothers in Romania last year, describing them as his friends in the description of his podcast. That's not very meaningful, but going to Romania. While Cernovich built his name online by making false human trafficking claims about a Washington pizzeria, the Tates may soon be accused of genuine human trafficking. Oh my gosh, once again, every single accusation from a Republican is a confession. I said it on Twitter the other day. If you're a journalist getting set to run with an allegation being made, especially about human trafficking, by a Republican, you are being pwned. You are being chumped if you publish that without noting that police should probably investigate this person immediately, because 100% of the time, every one of these accusations turns out to be a confession. Here's this one. While Cernovich was making his name online with the Pizzagate thing, the Tates, of course, were actually doing the stuff. In a statement provided to the Daily Beast, Romania's Directorate for Investigating Organized Crime and Terrorism said the raid on Tate's house was part of an investigation that began after a woman was reported to be held at the house against her will. Gee whiz. As the probe continued, it escalated to include crimes of human trafficking and rape. Video from the raid show police officers armed with rifles milling among the Tate's sports cars with a neon Tate logo on a wall in the background. Another video showed Tate and his brothers being shoved into vans by police officers before being driven away from their homes and hopefully executed and dumped in a ravine. But I guess that didn't happen. Anyway, a Romanian newspaper reported that the raid was sparked over reports that an American woman was being held captive at the Tate house. Police found both the American and a Romanian woman in the building during the raid. according to the report. In a statement on the raid to the Daily Beast, the U.S. State Department spokesperson alluded to a reported abduction of an American citizen, but declined to comment further. So, a little bit of mystery left here. And, of course, we'll have to stop this story here. But the rest of the story is about how disgusting a person Tate and his brother are. Both of them are. And you can read it for yourself and turn your stomach, I guess, on your own time. We'll be right back.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is with us and waking up, getting started this morning. You're a couple hours behind us because of Idaho and all that. Time zones, it's nothing else. But so anyway, the big stories all over that everybody's talking about besides, oh my God, Twitter is going to collapse because Elon Musk bought it. We've covered the Mark Meadows text dump, and there'll be more to come, and many of you will discover more treasures, I'm sure, buried in that trove. And again, I'd encourage you to go ahead and read up that story on the Daily Beast, and you know how the Daily Beast has that scroll of stories. The next one is, equally stupid. The right wing is chock full of really very disturbed people. And as we've always said, every accusation is a confession. It's all projection with them. Right down to that, it now occurs to me how much time the right wing people have always spent saying, being a leftist, being a liberal is a mental illness. They love to say things like that. But as it turns out, that too is just a confession and just projection. There are very many very deeply, deeply disturbed people operating on the right. And, the fringes of everything has a number of deeply disturbed people. The problem is that the actual, president of the United States, although who knows whether that he was ever actually president of the United States, was intimately involved in all of their lunacy and believed it all, and how extraordinarily dangerous that is for so many reasons. And at least it's all coming to light now. But yes, the arrests and deportations aren't happening fast enough for any of us. That's true. But back to reality, since we're not going to get any of that.
I don't like reality anymore.
Yeah. I know, it's no fun. And all the things you learned growing up, like you can't do this, or that's illegal, or the Constitution says you can't do something, or if you frontally attack the Capitol, you won't make it inside, or for that matter, if you fly a plane unauthorized over the federal enclave, they will shoot you down. All of this turns out not to be true, is it? I mean, not that I wanted that plane shot out of the sky.
Yeah, but the parachutists landing in National Field. What's the name of the
Nationals Park there?
Nationals Park.
I don't know what
it would not have been good for them to have been shot down, but it probably would have been good for the FAA to have given.
Like a heads up. This is going to happen. Don't shoot it down.
This was going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that just lends credence, I think, to the theory that why didn't the FAA feel like that was necessary? Because they know that you're not really going to just shoot down a plane. I guess. Unless it's just
but
massive negligence.
Is that a thing you want to play with? Is that a chance you want to take? It was just...
They must know more than we do about that.
Really, by now you think we would be good enough at this governing thing.
Yeah. Well...
To not have the stupid stuff like that happen. But, clearly we're not.
I don't know why you would think that. I mean... Is there any particular danger?
Congress every single week, and why would I think that we're competent, that we have an actual functioning government?
Yeah. I mean, it would be different if there was evidence of, significant danger to government installations from rogue planes. If that had happened at any point, then I could see why people would be concerned about it. But since that's never happened... And even if it had, it wouldn't have been foreseeable... then I can't see why you would do anything different. So, all right. Well, anyway, these are the people driving reality. You're the one covering their reality. What's happening? What are they paying attention to?
It's really depressing, as usual. Yeah. Sorry, gang.
That's okay.
I mean, there's. Let's see. What is positive that I can tell you about what Congress is doing right now?
Oh, well.
The House passed a big package, $55 billion, to continue to aid restaurants and venues that have been hit so hard by the pandemic.
Oh. Okay.
That's good. The Senate's not ever going to pass it, but the House did it.
Right. Well, it's nice of them to do that. They like restaurants, and many people work in them, and therefore it's a good thing. The Senate really has no intention of taking it up?
Republicans aren't going to allow it. No, Republicans would not allow the $22.5 billion so that we could get more booster shots and more treatments.
Well, they hate shots.
And in fact, they've been fighting against that now for weeks and weeks, and we're not seeing a breakthrough. There might be one in a sort of a double-edged sword. The crazy anti-immigrant racist judge in Louisiana, was that where it was? Who moved to temporarily block Biden from lifting the Title 42 restrictions.
Oh, yeah, I'm not even sure.
On migrants. That happened yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Republicans have been using Biden trying to lift Title 42 at the end of May 23rd, to stop the COVID aid from being voted on.
We won't allow
They've been insisting that they get an amendment, a simple majority amendment, voted on along with the COVID-19 funding in order to allow the vote. So...
That's what they're spending their time on. Okay.
The judge having now said, okay, Biden, you're blocked from lifting this, might be a breakthrough on the COVID funding, or it might not. It's Republicans we're talking about.
Yeah. So, they've gotten their way. The question is, will they now say, all right, since we've gotten our way, we'll do this thing? Or was it really what we wanted was Biden
why they're doing it is because there are 5 Democratic senators, Sinema, Manchin, Warnock, Hassan, and I don't remember the 5th, Kelly, who would probably vote with the Republicans.
Okay.
And so
want that to happen.
Schumer doesn't want to have that vote. He doesn't want to embarrass Biden by having these 5 thumb their nose at him on the Senate floor.
Yeah.
They're not going to change their mind, near as we can see. So it's a dilemma. In the meantime, the administration has already had to stop providing treatments for people who are uninsured. And they're rationing out monoclonal antibodies. Is that how you say it?
Yes, monoclonal, yeah.
Monoclonal, thank you.
I think so. That's
I
what
haven't
Greg
had enough
says.
coffee this morning.
Well.
And now they're saying, if we can't get this funding, we can't secure new doses. There are other countries getting in line ahead of us. It takes quite a while, about 6 months of lead time for all of these treatments to be produced.
Okay.
And we're falling behind. So they're going to be snatched up by other countries that, care
I guess.
and will pay for it. And if we get another surge in the fall, we might not have what we need to try to stop it.
Not so great. And, I guess it makes a certain amount of sense about what we know about Republicans. It's not enough that they got the result they wanted. They wanted Biden to be embarrassed in a certain way on the floor of the Senate, not in the courts. So we didn't get what we wanted because we're not about policy. We're about burning Biden the way we want to.
Pretty much, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Won't take yes for an answer.
And also they could possibly be thinking, well, we don't care if tens of thousands of more people die. So if we have a bad surge in the fall, maybe that'll help us at the polls in November. Because people will be mad at Biden. Because COVID's not over. Maybe. I don't know how these people think, but I would not be surprised if that was part of the calculation.
I guess, but they're not worried at all that the people that they're thinking it will help them with will be dead.
Yeah, but that hasn't bothered them so far.
I mean, it hasn't bothered them, but I mean, do they realize? It's fine, I guess. If you want to live your life that way, then I'm unbothered by the deaths of thousands, tens of thousands, even millions. But if I need them to vote, am I not concerned about that? Like, I don't care that they're dead, but I am a little annoyed that they're not voting.
That is a weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, maybe they're just going to cast their ballots or just going to cheat. There's always that. We've been planning for that for a long time.
Well, they will cheat. We know that.
So, I mean, that's certainly in the offing. But, I mean, I don't know. It would take a little longer, perhaps, for us to catch them cheating, if it ever mattered, if the people who cast the ballots were alive. Like, you'd be able to say, well, they could have. They are alive. But if they're dead, it's just an open and shut thing. But I guess, it doesn't matter if it's open and shut if you don't own the Secretary of State's office in those places. So, okay. I don't know. I would have thought that they wanted those people. On balance, I'd like them to be alive. And
they don't really care about people being alive.
That is astonishing. I don't know what else
they just don't.
It takes to get people to say, I thought that they thought it would be better if I was alive. Apparently, they don't think that, but I like them anyway. They'll give me what I want. If I were here to enjoy it, it would be great. But I'm dead, so I don't know. I just don't get it. Well, we'll see how it plays out.
We will see how it plays out.
What else do you say to that?
I have no idea. Schumer has talked about tying this funding to Ukraine aid because that's a must-pass thing. It's got to happen. So maybe that'll happen. Maybe that'll happen because Republicans have decided that, yes, it looks better to be on Ukraine's side than Russia's side.
They have said that.
And they do love funding the defense industry. So
yeah, that too. So I mean, that's some big targets for them there, and they have decided. Yeah, it's just not comfortable to sit here and stay pro-Russian, which is progress. Like usually they really don't seem to care or understand the consequences of things. So it's good that there's something predictable.
Or they're
that really
objectively
drives
pro-Russian, which up until this invasion they really were.
Yeah. So it's a good thing that they recognize that they can't stay that way. I mean, they might really still be that way, but that they need to be publicly supportive of Ukraine is progress. It means that there's a pressure point. So I guess, you should use it for everything you can, and maybe that's the way to leverage policy changes.
You got to do it in a filibuster world. This is how Schumer has to do it.
Yeah.
And speaking of Joe Manchin, our favorite person, he's now pretty much indicated we've had about 2 weeks, maybe a month of talk about, well, he's sort of talking with Biden again, and we're sort of maybe looking at what can be done. And he says he wants to reform the tax code, which Sinema doesn't. He says he wants to help people afford their insurance. That might be something that happens. And also included in the things he was thinking about doing in reconciliation was climate change stuff.
Oh.
So yesterday he pops up and says, nope, I've got a bipartisan group that I am working with, and we're going to figure out how to do the climate bill, the energy bill, in a bipartisan way so we don't have to do it with reconciliation.
Hi. All right. Another long slog through this mess.
Another long slog through this mess, which means essentially we are not going to have climate change legislation of any kind passed this year because Manchin is doing his bipartisan thing. And it's the same thing he did on voting rights.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get 10 Republicans, I'll get 10 good people, and we'll make sure voting rights passes.
Yes, right. Still waiting.
And we know what happened there.
Yeah. All right. Well, the same 10, I'm sure he's after the same 10. And what can I tell you? I guess all you can do is say good luck because you can't stop him. And I understand.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of Republicans who would love to get their stamp on what is now, he's calling it an energy bill now.
Well, that'll help
and
bring him on board.
Of course, we know anything that passes with Joe Manchin and 10 Republicans can't pass in the House.
That's also a possibility. Yeah, he's not usually speaking for the majority in the House. We'll see what he puts together. If he puts anything together. I mean, it might just be a time-wasting thing.
He actually did end up putting a really pretty decent voting rights bill together. It was quite good. It addressed all of the main stuff.
That's true. I had forgotten about that.
Because a lot of Democrats jumped in and worked on it with him.
Told him what was necessary.
But of course there weren't 10 Republicans who were going to vote for it. Of course there weren't.
No.
So it didn't happen.
But it was a nice thought. But not much of a lesson drawn. He's now taking the same approach to climate change. And although, I suppose it's possible he might also produce a good bill that won't go anywhere. Or he could produce a bad bill that does.
I think chances of that on this issue are a lot slimmer.
He's not the kind of guy, who's going to be open to. For whatever reason, the door was open to voting reforms and voter protections because, he hasn't made a name for himself being anti-voter protection.
Right. So. He has made a name for himself. He's made a fortune for himself.
Yes.
In the dirtiest possible coal industry possible.
Yeah.
The stuff that he's made his millions on is stuff that nobody else wanted because it is so dirty.
Yeah. And
but
low efficiency.
He corruptly set up a system as governor to make really sure that it was going to work for him.
He's innovative. We can give him that.
He is innovative.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite...
I guess this would mean he's smarter than I've always thought he was. If he could figure out how to... Maybe he's just more larcenous.
That could be. That's another way
maybe
of
he had
it.
Smart people helping him.
Yeah. Like he didn't figure out a way to say... he could have. The other option was, as governor, we're going to carpet all of West Virginia. The whole thing is just going to be wall-to-wall, border-to-border carpeting. He could have just gone that direction. But that was crazy. But then the idea of burning garbage for energy occurred to him, and I guess that sounded more realistic. He had a carpet business, and he just said, forget it. But, could have carpeted all the state buildings or something like that, and people would have, I guess, seen through that.
I think that would have been too obvious.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I'll keep that one for myself. Note to self, I can start a carpet business in case I ever get a chance. All right. Well,
I think that's an excellent idea.
Well, why not? People love carpet. They haven't stopped buying it yet. So Why not do the whole place? And yeah. All right. Well, so I saw Joe Manchin mentioned the other day. I guess somehow there's polling that shows that he's actually extraordinarily popular.
He is extraordinarily popular.
In West Virginia, I guess, maybe. But
West Virginia loves him.
Sure.
So.
But yeah, it said he was like one of the 10 most popular political figures in the country with the numbers he was generating there. So I guess there's something.
I think maybe because everybody else hates him. It's a small, picked on, bullied state kind of reaction. Everybody hates him, so we have to rally behind him. I don't know.
Maybe that's a possibility. You know, your hometown pride kind of a thing.
Yeah, it could be that. It's not working for Sinema.
No? Oh, well.
She's like 7th least popular.
Well,
behind Mitch McConnell and Susan Collins.
Oh, okay. Well, they should be leading. But yeah, she's going to have to, well, either give up and leave or find some way of tapping into that Manchin magic, and I'm not certain.
I don't think that's going to work for her. I think she's going to end up having to retire and rake in the dough from. I still don't see it though. I mean, who's going to want to have her lobbying for them when she's made so many enemies?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Stranger things have happened. I guess you could take a stab at it, but all right. Yeah, she could go on Dancing with the Stars. I don't know how much that's worth.
She could do that, yes.
But that's at least a temporary bridge, I'm sure. Right, so all right. That's an option. Keep it open. But at least, Manchin can say his formula is working for him in his state, and that's always been the argument, and he's a Democrat capable of winning West Virginia, and we all have to swallow hard, and it's better than having a Republican. It's barely better than having a Republican, but it is.
At this point, I don't know with the angst he's causing if it is better than having a Republican. I mean, the only thing is Mitch McConnell in leadership is horrifying.
Yeah, and
the only thing less horrifying than McConnell in leadership is McConnell in a 50-50 Senate.
Mm-hmm. You have to take what we can get there, and I mean, as you've emphasized all along as they've been running through judicial nominations, a lot of that that wouldn't be happening.
Right.
We wouldn't be getting those, and that's an enormous thing and a huge change and a new Supreme Court justice, and all of that would have been impossible. And that's the only redeeming thing, perhaps, about Manchin and Sinema, but it's a big, big thing.
It's a big, big thing.
So,
of course, they're also opposing some critical nominees in the executive branch. So again, there's a little bit of a two-edged sword there, but we are getting the most diverse judiciary ever. So that's huge, and really beating Trump's record, which is also important. Just
Trump
for scorekeeping.
Yeah, that's worth something.
And I'm sure that's part of what's going on in Schumer's head, is that I'm going to get more judges through than McConnell did.
Yeah, well, take your victories where you can find them, because there's not going to be any substantive ones. So,
of course, the point is, and without actually expanding the Supreme Court and fixing that, it's great to have all of these judges, but something has to be done at the top to make having all of these judges mean anything.
Yep. I know that's a long shot for getting people on board with, but it is true that it's not worth nearly as much without that. Though again, if
you could take over the circuits, if you could
be helpful.
Maybe not expand the Supreme Court, but expand the bad circuits and dilute their power, that would be one thing.
That's true.
Maybe that's a compromise expansion we could argue for.
I would agree. I'd certainly take it over nothing. And as much as you want to start with the top, if for whatever reason people are just afraid of going there and looking like it's partisan overreach, You'll be attacked in the same way, of course, for trying to expand the circuits, but it is something that, because it's not the Supreme Court, there just will be fewer eyes on it. I think you have a real good point there.
So you would get less
go do
crazy
that.
stuff being elevated to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the Fifth being such a reliable bomb-throwing mechanism. Of course, you could also just, forego the whole process and have them continue to put out shadow docket emergency rulings.
Yes.
Bypassing the circuits, which they've done in a couple of instances. So.
Yeah. But
it would still help. It
Yeah.
would still help. It still needs to be done.
And right. If they're making decisions with the full knowledge that of what tools are available to the Supreme Court, sometimes you have the opportunity to tailor your rulings in such a way that it becomes more difficult to handle on the shadow docket, or sets up different issues for the Supreme Court to have to consider. Once it gets to them, it's sort of out of your hands. But the more cases that they snap up that they used to leave to the circuits, they're increasing their docket and the number of cases they're treating. The workload does get overwhelming, and it, of course, makes the case better for expanding the Supreme Court every time they do it.
Absolutely.
So, if they work themselves to death, well, if they work themselves to death literally, well then fine, we'll replace them. But if they, do it figuratively, they'll continue to insist that they don't want the court expanded. But if we begin to see the quality of and we already are seeing the quality of the decisions fall, and less explanation given for the decisions they're taking, especially on the shadow docket. That's one of the excuses that they have for not actually writing any opinions. But people are used to hearing the explanations, and eventually, when I think they get around to just failing to issue opinions on things and simply telling us the vote, that'll strike a weird chord with people.
We're nearly there, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a lot of shadow docket decisions that are 2 sentences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't see why they're not limited to it, and I don't know that they'll ever avoid it entirely. Doing the same with the substantive cases that they take up. Some of these things, the decisions that they're going to need to make for the Republican Party, which is what they're there for, are going to defy explanation, and I believe that eventually they'll simply say, rather than embarrass myself trying to come up with a dumb one, what if I just say nothing?
Because we said so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all there is. And then, it'll take a while to catch on with people that something wrong with this here, and we can't abide by it. But hopefully that won't take too long and doesn't delay reform. But I think your idea about moving it to the circuits is an excellent one. And it may be the only thing that they can get support for sooner and make any real moves with. It's a much lower profile situation, and it's harder for Republicans in the Senate to stake out that position.
I think it'd be a lot harder.
Yeah, there's just not as much interest. So
I'm full of good ideas, Kagro.
You are. There's a good one.
I don't
right
know
there.
why we're not in control. We could be doing a much better job.
Right. And again, get on that carpet business if this ever happens.
Like where do you get the money for COVID-19 treatments? They're talking about still fighting over how to get the funding, and it's got to be from money already spent. Well, go get it from the $80 billion that's been wasted fraudulently by all of those people who got PPP loans that shouldn't have.
Yes.
They'll pay it back.
That's
where you get your money.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I know that when they proposed the thing and people were concerned that the standards were too loose, the answer was that, we know that, but we really need to inject this money into the economy quickly, and there are mechanisms that we can use to get it back if it's gained fraudulently. So then, okay, where are they?
Now's the time to use them.
Yeah.
Go get that money.
You're right. All right. Well, yeah, the Senate should be reduced to 2, I think. And I think you and me could probably do it. Although
We could do it.
We're
I think we
busy.
could do it. We could hire smart people to help.
Oh, yeah. Right. That's true. We could get help. We wouldn't have to do it all ourselves necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm not that ambitious.
All right.
Okay.
Next time we're on, and I think it's probably going to be in 3 weeks. You're out next week?
Yes. Right.
I'm out the week after.
Okay. Well, have a good
So
time.
by the time we're back together, we'll have plotted our coup and we'll have figured out how to do it.
Right. That's true. And 3 weeks ought to be enough to start a carpet business. So I'll get
There
on
you
that.
go.
And carpeting a federal installation near you very shortly. Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks very much for the time today. I'm sorry. Yeah, we're going to miss 2 in a row, huh? All right. Well, we'll have to just tweet things to each other, and then the Tuesday that we're back on the air, I'll just tell you what we would have heard from you had you been free to join us. Is it vacation or something else?
It's moving.
Moving. Oh, well, not that exciting, but being in a new place will be, I guess. So, all right. Well, we wish you well with
temporary
that.
place. I'll fill you all in on it later.
Okay. And anybody who's available to help or move things, sign up now online.
Yeah.
And if you have to
take
move
my
that piano, then I'll be there.
All right.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, thanks, Joan. We'll catch up with you in a little bit. And, of course, we'll be hearing from you on the front pages of Daily Kos and on Twitter, at least until Elon Musk kicks us off.
Yes.
All right? Okay. Hang in there. We'll see you in 3 weeks. Hard to
All righty.
fathom.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right. Well, next you get to listen to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. And although sometimes it feels like 3 weeks until his show comes on, it is in fact only 2 excruciating hours to get through my show. And of course, he'll be examining all the things that we missed today, like including the weirdness happening in the Secret Service. Stay tuned.